Hi everyone! Do you struggle with finally getting that positive pregnancy test and how awesome it is? I'm finally being pregnant, but struggle with the question of, how to give people the news. Who do you tell and when do you tell them? What's appropriate? When is it too soon to tell them? When is the appropriate time? Do you wait? Do you do it right away? Who do you tell? Do you tell your mom? Do you tell your friends? Do you tell everybody you know? It can be really a big, tough question. And if this is something that you struggle with, then this is the video for you. My name is Stephanie Roth. I'm a fertility consultant and coach with yourfertileself.com, and that's exactly what I'm going to talk to you about in this video. And I'm going to give you a very effective litmus test to give yourself when faced with that question of who and when to tell the happy news. And this litmus test works without fail every single time. It will always steer you in the direction that is right for you. So I see this all the time come up in the online communities that I'm part of. I see it come up with my own fertility clients. It actually just came up earlier this week in my own Facebook group, Path to Your Fertile Self. People are asking this question all the time. I'm finally pregnant, yay! When can I tell people? When should I tell people? What is right? Who do I tell? Do I tell, I've seen all kinds of things. Some people say, well, I just tell my mom and then I wait to tell everyone else, or I'll tell my best friend and my mom right away, and then I'll wait till 12 weeks to tell everyone else. Some people wait for the gender reveal. Some people don't even tell others until after the baby's born, especially if it's, relatives who are far away. So, you can kind of do whatever works best for you, but it's hard to know what works best for you. But that's the important thing, is to really tune into yourself and figure out for you, when does it feel right for you to share the news? And who does it feel right to share the news with at any particular point in time? It can be, and especially if you've struggled, the reason some people like to wait is because if you've struggled to get pregnant and if you've had losses, it's very emotional, very gut-wrenching, very difficult to share the news of those losses. And if you tell people that you're pregnant before you have a loss, then eventually, they're going to find out that you had a loss, and it's just really hard to go back and share that news with people because it's such an emotional, personal, gut-wrenching thing, and then to have to go back and tell people, and just kind of continue rehashing it. It's just one of the most difficult things a woman goes through on top of the process of losing a pregnancy itself. So that's why people like to wait. And that's why some people just don't even tell anyone until they're thinking that they're kind of safely out of the woods and the news is safe to share. So it's hard, but you want to tell everyone because you're so happy in the beginning. So it's a lot to grapple with. And if you've already struggled and you're just finally blessed with the joy of a positive pregnancy, it's a kind of new emotional minefield to weather, sharing the news and when and with whom. So I have a litmus test on, figuring out who to tell and when to tell them. And I'm going to share with you the litmus test, and then I'm going to tell you my own story and why I know this litmus test works. Because it works foolproof every single time. So here is the litmus test. When you are faced with the possibility of sharing news that you're pregnant, which is wonderful, happy news, this is the question that you ask yourself. If you're considering whether or not to tell a particular person, you ask yourself this question. If this person, insert name of person, if this person were to suddenly die tomorrow, completely out of the blue and unexpectedly, if they were to die tomorrow, would I regret that they didn't know that I was pregnant? And honestly ask yourself that question. And if the answer is yes, then that you would regret that they didn't know, then by all means, you share the news with them. If the answer is like, well, no, I really wouldn't regret it, then you don't have to tell them. But if you would regret that they didn't know, then you want to tell them. It might sound hokey, it might sound corny, it might sound very drastic, but this is exactly what happened to me. And I'm going to share with you my story. So the first time I got pregnant, I had a miscarriage. It was in March of 2012, and I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even tell my mom. I think I might have told my best friend at the time. I kind of seem to think that maybe I shared the news with her because she lived near me, but my mom lived like 4 hours away. So I didn't tell my mom. So when I discovered that I was losing the pregnancy, I had no one to lean on for support. And that was hard, except for my husband, and that was hard. But I, kind of weathered that storm and dealt with that process, got through that, had a DNC, started trying again. When I got pregnant the second time, well, the second time was also a loss, so that doesn't count. The third pregnancy, in March of 2013, I got pregnant again. And this pregnancy looked to be it looked like it was gonna be viable. It looked like it was gonna go the whole 9 months. I still resisted telling people, even my mom, my own mom. I just felt like I wanted to wait till it was 12 weeks. I wanted to wait till it was safe. I had 2 losses already, and I just didn't want to have to deal with that in case it was going to be another loss. I really didn't want to tell people, even my mom. My mom, however, had other plans. My mom had decided that she was going to take us as a family. We were going to go to away for Christmas. We were going to go to the Caribbean and have a family Christmas in the Caribbean, and she and my dad were gonna pay for it. So my mom was totally harassing me with emails. I mean, my mom likes to plan things really far in advance. She's very organized. Once she decided that she wanted to go on this trip, she wanted to plan the whole thing. And so getting pregnant in March meant that the baby was gonna be born in December. It was gonna be due in December. So once we found out we were pregnant, we knew that we wouldn't be able to go on the family trip to the Caribbean. But I hadn't told my mom yet. And my mom was harassing me with emails, oh, I check out this resort. What do you think about this place to go stay? What do you think about these dates to travel? Once we buy the airline tickets, they're non-refundable, so I want to lock in the dates now. And what do you think about going to visit this city? I mean, she was doing all her research to plan this family trip. And I was really dragging my feet on answering her questions. And finally, one day, she sent 5 emails in one day. And the last one was please get back to me. I could read the tone, you haven't responded to me. I need to hear from you. She was getting annoyed. And so my husband, and I was 9 weeks at that point. And my husband was you are not gonna be able to put her off for another 3 weeks. You're just not gonna be able to. You have to tell her. So I was okay, I know you're right. So I felt so my mom, without knowing it, kind of outed me before I was ready to be outed, really. But I called my mom on a Sunday afternoon, and I said, Mom, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. And I said, the bad news, I'll do the bad news first. I said, the bad news is we're not gonna be able to go on the family Christmas trip. And my mother was just okay, why? So she was annoyed. So she had it in her head. She was really excited about this. So she's okay, why? And I was well, that's the good news. I said, the good news is we're having a baby and the baby's due in December. My mom, there was just this moment of stunned silence on the phone. You have to remember, I was 43. So my mom was probably pretty convinced that she was never gonna be a grandmother. There was just this moment of stunned silence on the phone, and then she just shrieked, the trip's off! The trip's off! She went into overdrive at that point. She's I'm gonna come down, I'm gonna help you, we're gonna go shopping for nursery furniture, we're gonna buy this, we're gonna buy that, I'm gonna buy the crib, I'm gonna give you the rocking chair from the attic, and blah, blah, blah. She went into overdrive. She was so excited. And after I got off the phone with her, and she cried, she just cried tears of joy. And she said, I remember so vividly, she said, this child is going to be so loved. This is going to be a very loved child and a very wanted child. And those words have always stuck with me. So in the end, I was really glad that I told her, even though it was 3 weeks before I really kind of felt like I was originally going to, according to my original plan. And it looked like it was going to be a viable pregnancy, so I felt okay about that. And it was my mom, so I should have just told her from the beginning. But I just didn't feel comfortable doing that until she kind of forced me to, because about this whole thing with this trip. So we had 3 weeks of wonderful bliss, me and my mom, just, emailing back and forth and talking about plans for the nursery and plans for the baby, and she's going to come down and help and stay for a long time, and all that kind of stuff. And then one day, about 2.5 weeks, I can't remember now if it was 2.5 weeks or 3.5 weeks after I told my mom, I think it was 3.5 weeks after I told my mom, it was on a Wednesday, and I had just passed out of the first trimester. The week before, I had gone for the first trimester screening test, where they check for defects and potentials for, abnormalities and that sort of thing. It's like big screening at the end of the first trimester, and I had just had that. And I had done the genetic screening too. Being over 40, I was kind of eligible for all those tests. And I had talked to my mom on Monday, and I said, I had gone in the previous Friday, and I had talked to my mom on Monday, and I said, I haven't gotten the test results yet. She's like, well, call me as soon as you get them. And that was on Monday. And on Wednesday, I was at work at my job, and I got a call from the genetics lab, the genetics counselor, and I wasn't able to return. I got a message, and I wasn't able to return the call before before the end of the workday to get the results. And I remember just thinking to myself, oh, I don't get the results today. I have to wait till tomorrow, and I don't get to call my mom today. And I remember telling my coworkers when I left work, because this was sort of my marker. Getting good test results from the first trimester screen was sort of my marker to begin telling people that we were pregnant. I'd be officially in the second trimester, and if the news from that screening was good, I would start telling people. And I remember telling my coworker when I left work that day, like, oh, there might be big news tomorrow, thinking that I'd get my test results and then I'd be able to kind of start sharing the news. I went to yoga class, and then I went home, and I ate dinner, and was just kind of doing things at home. And at 9:30 at night, my phone rang, and we still had a landline at that point, so it was the landline that rang. And at 9:30 at night is like not so late that people do call that late, but it's kind of like people don't really call that late unless it's important. So we knew it was important. My husband answered the phone, and it was my dad. And my husband gave me the phone, and he just said bad news. He didn't know what the news was, but my dad told him there was bad news. And my dad was calling to tell me that he had gone to work that day, came home from work, and he found my mom dead in their living room. So my mom died that day. And it was such a shock. And I just remember being like, I just talked to her 2 days ago. So it was a shock. It was not expected. My mom wasn't ill or anything, it was sudden and unexpected. No time to prepare, no time to even think about that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden to process this like incredible shock, this wave of shock just came over me that my mom was gone. So I spent a few minutes on the phone with my dad. He told me what he knew. He'd had the coroner come and all that, and they took her away. And to this day, I still feel so bad for my dad that he had to be alone in their house that night. I actually thought about, it was like 9:30 at night at that point. I actually thought about getting in a car and driving up to my dad's house, which is 4 hours away from me, which meant I would get there at like 1:30 in the morning. But my dad said, no, you stay, you come tomorrow. And so I left real early the next day. So I was processing all this shock, and I was on the phone with my dad, for a few minutes. I said I would see him the next day. And then I talked to my sister, and then I talked to my aunt, my mom's sister. And then I kind of settled down and tried to go to sleep. And I just tossed and turned that whole night. And it was after I was off the phone with everyone that I realized I said to myself, oh my gosh, my mom is gonna miss everything with the baby. And I was like, I'm finally pregnant. I'm finally, after waiting until I was over 40 to even try to have a baby, after having 2 miscarriages, after struggling for a year, I'm finally pregnant and it looks like it's gonna stick. And my mom's gone and she's not gonna share it with me. And when I went the next day, I drove up to my dad's house to be with him and to start planning my mom's memorial service. I got the phone call in the car from the genetics counselor. She was returning my message, returning her message to me. And it was in the car, when I was in the car driving to my dad's, that I got the really great news about my fabulous test results. About how the baby looked really good, the potential for abnormalities or genetic defects was incredibly low. She actually told me my test results were typical for those of a 31-year-old woman. I was 43. So everything looked really good with the pregnancy. And I was happy to hear that, but I was still just awash in this just initial stage of shock and grief over my mom. And I got off the phone with the genetics counselor. My husband was driving, and I told my husband the news that everything looked good with the baby, and they didn't need me to do any more testing, so I didn't have to do an amniocentesis or a CVS or anything like that because my test results were indicated such a low probability of genetic issues that I didn't need to do any more testing, which was great, and we were very happy about that. And then I just thought to myself, I don't get to call my mom to tell her the way I had promised just 3 days before that I would. So I went up to my dad's and we planned my mom's memorial service, and it was that Saturday, and it was a gorgeous day weather-wise. It was just, perfect early summer, balmy day. And at least 3 or 4 of my relatives, there weren't a lot of people there since it was so sudden. Not a lot of people came to my mom's service, but 3 or 4 of my relatives came up to me and they said, your mother was so excited about your baby. When she told me that you were having a baby, that was the happiest I had heard her sound in a really long time. No fewer than 3 or 4 relatives told me that. So I understood at that point the sheer magnitude of the joy that news brought my mom in what ended up being the final 3 weeks of her life. And when my mom passed away and we had her service, that was when I was officially passing into the 2nd trimester. So that would have been around the time that I would have told her. And I think every day about how glad I am that I didn't wait to tell my mom, because if I had waited to when I was originally thinking of telling her in the 2nd trimester, I might not have told her before she passed away. And knowing that she was so happy for me and so excited about becoming a grandmother, and the closeness that it brought us together the last 3 weeks of her life, just is the one comforting thing out of the whole experience of losing her. So that is why that is my litmus test. If you're debating over whether or not to tell someone that you're pregnant and you're scared about losing the baby, or you're scared about anything that could go wrong, or if you're scared that telling someone is going to be a bad thing because you might have to go back and deliver bad news later, ask yourself, if this person were to suddenly die tomorrow, would you regret that they didn't know? I know that the regret I would have felt would have been so palpable. It would have had such a huge weight on me, and that's something I would have carried for the rest of my life, that my own mom wouldn't have known that I was pregnant and that I sat on that news and then she died. So I thank my lucky stars every day that I told her. I thank my lucky stars that she knew that she got to have that joy of knowing a baby was coming. So that is the litmus test. That is the litmus test. And if you ask yourself that question, you will always know if it's right to tell someone and when is the right time to tell them. So I hope that hearing my story helps to kind of put that question into proper perspective for you on sharing your pregnancy news. And then, of course, you know, as your pregnancy goes on and you tell more and more people, it just gets even easier and easier and more exciting to share the news. But I know that it's so difficult in those early days, wondering who to tell and when to tell them and when it's right. And the bottom line is it's what's right for you and in line with the answer to the question in my litmus test. Thank you so much for watching this video today, and I'll see you again sometime soon. Bye-bye.